All right. Hello and welcome everybody to July 2020 CocoaHeads. Just checking James and Carl, you guys are on the call?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Let's get this started.
Hi, Zach.
Hey. So we're joined tonight by James and Carl, and also Jack will be joining a bit later for a talk. I'll go over the agenda in just a moment. But yeah, hello and welcome everybody. So we're going to get started now. If you're not already in the Slack group, the URL is on the screen at the moment. Feel free to join the Slack group for discussions during tonight's meetup. And that's also where I'll be posting the link to our post meetup Zoom catch up if you'd like to join for that. So before we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which CocoaHeads normally takes place, and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present. Obviously, in the remote meetup era, we're all spread across, but it's the Eora Nation that we're normally on when we're hosting in Sydney. So a bit of housekeeping before we begin. Your hosts for this evening are myself, I'm Zach, and Carl. Nikki's not joining us tonight, but hey, Carl, thanks for joining. And as always, a big thank you to our sponsors. So we've got Billu, Academy, and Atlassian. A big thanks to them for their help in making this meetup possible and covering our costs. So a reminder, as always, that Sydney CocoaHeads has a code of conduct. The goal of the code of conduct is to make everybody feel welcome and comfortable at our meetups, whether they be in person or online. And the code of conduct can be summarized into 3 key points. The first being be respectful, the second be inclusive, and the third be aware. You can read it in full on our website. If you have any questions about it, or if you'd like to alert myself or Carl to code of conduct not being followed, please let us know. Or if you've got any suggestions on how we can improve things, feel free to let us know as well. We take all of those comments very seriously. So another reminder that we have a Slack community. It's not only useful on meetup night, but throughout the month as well. It's a place you can pop in and ask questions, chat with other iOS devs, post if you're looking for jobs, things like that. So again, the link's there if you want to join. And it's not just for tonight. You can join at any time and participate in discussion at any time. It's quite a bit of fun sometimes. So normally when we meet in person, we welcome our first-time attendees. Obviously, a bit more difficult when we're online, but all the same, welcome to everyone who's tuning in for the first time, and also a big welcome to people tuning in who couldn't normally because they don't live in Sydney. So welcome, especially, those people who can't normally attend but are now. So some events that are coming up to keep your eyes on. I know a lot of things have been cancelled, but we've still got a few that we can highlight. The first is DevWorld. We don't have any concrete details. I believe they're in the process of working things out, but DevWorld is still going ahead in some kind of remote form this year. It's normally held in Melbourne, and it's a great conference that happens about August or September. Really a lot of fun normally, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the online format will look like. There's always Melbourne CocoaHeads, which it's definitely always worth checking out. It occurs on the 2nd Thursday of the month as opposed to us, which is on the 3rd. So we never clash. And especially in this age of everything being online, it's definitely worth checking them out. Last week, they did a really excellent panel discussion in lieu of talks. And it was really well run, very informative. You can actually still check that out on their YouTube page. If you missed it, I'd recommend giving it a watch. It was a good panel discussion about WWDC and quite a lot of fun.
And I'll second that recommendation.
Yeah, it was good, hey. All right, so on to tonight's schedule. We'll get started with the hiring and firing. So the best way to chat about job availability, if you're either looking for work or if you're hiring at the moment, is actually on our Slack channel. Normally in person, we devote a section of the meetup to it, but it's a bit more difficult this time. For obvious reasons. But yeah, if you're looking for work or you know of a place that's hiring, feel free to post it in the jobs channel on the Slack group. I did ask yesterday if anyone wanted me to mention any jobs, and ARC Group is looking for mid to senior iOS devs. You can contact Bernie in the Slack for more details. All right, so getting on to tonight's schedule. First up, we've got a month in review by James, which is probably more like a WWDC in review. And we've also got a talk on signing with Apple with Jack, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then following that, we'll have a post-meetup Zoom catch-up. I'll be posting the link to that Zoom meeting on Slack at the conclusion of this event. I do ask that you don't share it publicly, especially on Twitter. Just kind of keep it between people on the Slack. Everyone's welcome to join, but generally when you post those things in public places, the URLs get scraped and it doesn't end well. All right, so August CocoaHeads, happening third Thursday of August. We're back as always. It'll be online again. We're always looking for talks. We actually have none lined up, and the event can't go ahead without talks. Talks are very important. So we're always looking for talks. Feel free to submit a talk. It would be much appreciated if you've kind of had a talk in the back of your mind that you'd like to give. Now's probably the time. Even if it's a lightning talk, that's still super awesome and welcome. Even if you only want to talk for 5 minutes, no problem. If you want some help workshopping a talk idea, I'm always available for a chat. Feel free to ping me just in the Slack group is fine, or on Twitter. Be happy to work through any ideas that you might have. But yeah, if you're interested in giving a talk, I definitely consider August. That would be awesome because we do need some talks. Otherwise, we don't have a meetup. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to James, who's going to kick us off with the month in review. Thanks, James. Take it away.
Awesome.
I will stop sharing my screen so that you can actually do that. There you go.
Okay, I think you need to enable that as well.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
All right, you should be good now. And Jack's joined us. Hey, Jack. James, who's going to kick us off with the month in review. Thanks, James. Take it away.
Awesome.
Stop sharing my
Okay.
screen.
Hi, everyone. My name is James, and this is the WWDC month in review for Sydney CocoaHeads. So I really love this part of the WW. The intro was really awesome this year, so I just want to chuck that in my slides. And for those of you that might be wondering, as I said, my name's James. This is actually my first Sydney CocoaHeads. So what a better way to sort of, do your first Sydney CocoaHeads than presenting at one. So this is gonna be really fun. You can feel free to follow me on Twitter. And if you have any questions about any of the content that I have, please feel free to reach out afterwards. I should also be around for the post CocoaHeads catch up as well. So this year, WWDC was really interesting. It was online. This is the first time that's ever happened. And I thought personally that this was just awesome. Like, it was really cool because, everyone can attend globally, right? Like, there was no reason for, if you couldn't make it because of the cost or flights or any of that, it was free for everybody. And it was just really cool on that front. Sessions were a lot shorter. So what that meant was, like, if an engineer could get their content across in, say, 5 minutes instead of 40, they did that and they were able to do that. And I think that was really good because, sort of like if you were interested in something, but you weren't quite sure about it and you wanted to just go ahead and watch it, you could actually go ahead and do that. And, the content was much more, bite-sized, more easier to sort of just take in. And so while that was really good, there were some things that, we did lose a little bit of the sort of community aspect. Like, I know there was a lot of events sort of that go around WWDC usually when it occurs in June. And so we did lose some of that aspect, but you know what, I think we made up for it sort of online in other ways. And what I also noticed as well was that a lot of labs were more sort of strictly timed. But I think this is also good sort of so that everybody sort of had a shot to ask questions and sort of like get, answers to those questions as well. That said, there was still over 200 plus sessions, which is insane. Definitely going to get you into jiggle mode because it was just super awesome. Plenty of sessions, and they were all really, really high quality sessions. Like, that you could tell that they were like well edited, and sort of there was a lot of content, not just in sessions, but also in sample code, the developer app, and the sessions all came out at a consistent time each day, so that you could sort of had enough time to take it in, and then the next day you take it a little bit more and a little bit more. So this is really incredible. And let's jump into the announcements. So one of the biggest announcements was Apple Silicon. So this is huge. And I think some people might be wondering, like, well, why is it huge, right? We have Apple Silicon right now across many devices, right? So we've got it in iPhones, we have it in iPads, and we have it in, a bunch of other Apple devices. But bringing Apple Silicon to Mac is sort of a whole new step forward in not only like what we can do on the Mac, but also just in what power the Mac has available, right? So personally, I'm really excited because this means that we're getting a neural engine on the Mac, right? So some calculations when you're doing machine learning stuff, happen a lot faster in the neural engine because it's designed specifically for machine learning, right? So having that power on the Mac is going to be really interesting. And I'm excited to sort of see what developers bring and what developers are sort of building on Apple Silicon. I think this is really exciting. And this year they sort of announced a developer toolkit, which allows you to actually get a prototype Apple Silicon unit to actually go ahead and build your apps on. I've got more on sort of how this works and a little bit more Apple Silicon later. So some of the other big things was iOS 14. So iOS 14, pretty big announcements and a lot of stuff happening, a lot of really, really cool stuff. And so I'm really excited to see all that. So let's talk first about app clips. I do have a slide on this later, but basically these are sort of small apps that you can install based on a sticker or based on NFC or sort of sharing that around without having to sort of go to the App Store, authenticate, download a whole app, and then sort of keep it around on your device. Another big thing, widgets. So widgets are really, really cool, pretty game changing to sort of the home screen experience. And I think it's going to give us as users a lot more personalization on the home screen. So I'm excited to sort of see that. But also as developers, we've had this sort of notion of widgets that have existed in Notification Center. And so having that on the home screen, I think is going to be really interesting in that like people are going to create some really cool stuff. I don't know, so some of even my apps, I'm thinking of like, oh, it'd be really cool if I had a widget for this or a widget for that. They can be different sizes on the home screen. And what's interesting about them is that the only way to currently do widgets is actually in SwiftUI. So I think this is a pretty good push from a development perspective for people to actually learn SwiftUI, right? Like I imagine a lot of apps are still sort of, in UIKit land, but it's going to be good to sort of add some SwiftUI to the project and have people sort of experimenting with SwiftUI as they sort of go and build these widgets. And then last but not least, we've got App Library. So App Library, what's interesting about this is like, I know personally, I've got a lot of pages and I have a lot of apps and sort of certain apps that I use on a more daily frequent basis, I think just gonna, still slide to and open them. And also if there's an app that I sort of want, I think I'd still probably use Spotlight, but where I think App Library really shines is in one of the categories that's mentioned there, I say Apple Arcade or like games, right? So there's a lot of apps that I have on my device where I don't use them every day, but when I do need to use them, they're very useful to have. And sometimes I sort of forget that I have them, right? So for instance, if I'm on a flight somewhere, I might want to have a bunch of like small, casual games that I can play, but I might not recall all the games that I have installed. So being able to not have them on the home screen all the time, but still able to find them in App Library, I think that's where the power of App Library really shines. So I'm really excited for that. And I think it's just going to make the device seem a whole lot smarter. And one of the widgets that was on there was sort of a Siri suggestion widget, which will actually suggest the most relevant widget. So that's really cool. And I think that it's sort of like, when you sort of get those lock screen notifications, it suggests actions to you, those kinds of things. It's these little, dusts of sort of Siri that have come across the OS that makes the experience feel, really smart and really intuitive. And on Siri, Siri now has 20 times more facts, super exciting. I think this is really cool. I think it's going to make the whole interaction with Siri, a lot smoother. And also it's just going to feel like, you can get more out of her without sort of having a, hey, would you like me to search the web? And so, on top of all of that, the whole Siri experience has also been redesigned with a new UI, right? So Siri no longer takes up the whole screen. And basically you sort of, you get these sort of like cards that pop over that will basically give you the information that you need. And I think this is really cool. And I think it's also pretty good because it sort of fits in well with a lot of the new designs that we're seeing across some of the new updates to macOS as well as to iOS as well. Another thing I'm really excited about is cycling directions. So we're now getting cycling directions across all the major platforms. So we're getting it on watchOS, we're getting it on macOS and iOS. Traditionally, people that would go bike riding would need to actually download another app in order to do cycling directions. So having this in Apple Maps, I think, is going to be really game changing and also really good if you just want to say like, hey, is it quicker if I, is the walk versus bike distance, is it worth me taking one or the other, right? Or instead of public transport, can I get bike directions? Now, this is only supported, I believe, in 5 cities. A lot of US cities, Beijing, and I can't recall the other one, but there was a few other cities that were that was launched in. I can't wait till this reaches Australia, but I think it should be a matter of time, hopefully, and I'm really excited for this feature. On that travel transport sort of side of things, there's also keyless entry, or called car keys, and so this is pretty exciting because, you know, I sort of imagine right now, I mean, at least in Australia where we've got like a 99% Apple Pay, you know, acceptance rate, you can go out of the house with, you know, just your phone and you can get away with it, right? But then you sort of still need your keys to sort of, you know, you can get away with your door key if you've got sort of HomeKit and you've got smart locks and all that, but you can't really do that for your car. So being able to have more of that, you know, the keys on your keychain, your physical one that is, you know, on your device, I think will be really exciting. And sort of, you know, maybe one day we can leave, you know, unlock the door with HomeKit, hop into our car, hop in the car with, you know, car keys, and then just drive, go somewhere, grab lunch, Apple Pay. I can sort of see that being a really ideal case, right? So this is actually available now on 13.6. And I'm mind blown with it. So you can actually grant people as well, like restricted access or full access. And they've really thought out sort of how this actually works from the experience perspective. So I'm really excited to see that. I just need one of these new fancy cars that supports it now. So on new and fancy, we have app clips. So I no longer want to have a paper menu, thanks. I want an app clip. But no, seriously. So basically, you know, there's a lot of apps that I would download, you know, to order from a particular restaurant or sort of just to see the menu without having to sort of, you know, look at, you know, these menus that are changing or whatever. So having apps installed, I don't always need to have the full app, right? So being able to go in somewhere, use an app clip, I think is going to be incredible. And basically, you can scan these as a QR code, or you can scan them, get sent them, etc. And then you can actually use a slimmed down version of the application and sort of, you know, all the functions that exist with it. So another good example of this is sort of not ride sharing, the scooter sharing. So in America, at least in the Bay Area, scooter sharing is quite common. And so, you know, there's like 100 different companies, and like you might have one or two of the apps installed, but you might not want to download a whole new app just to try out a scooter, right? So being able to just sort of walk up to a scooter, scan an app clip, and then start using it is going to be really cool. And there's a lot of things that I think we interact with on a daily basis where, you know, if you do it frequently enough, you'll download the app, right? But if you don't do it frequently enough and you want to just do it once or twice, having the app clip will be extremely beneficial in those circumstances. Cool. Next up, Scribble. So this is another thing that I'm really excited about because, you know, I mean, when I was using iPad previously, if I sort of was using my pencil and then I had to type somewhere, you got to do the really awkward, hold the pencil and still try to type. Now you can just handwrite it in, right? So basically you handwrite in any text field and iOS will convert that handwriting into text and put it in there as if you were to type it in. You know, this is incredible. I think it's really cool. There was a lot of stuff done on the development side as well for developers using PencilKit to actually get a lot of sort of, you know, shape information and a bunch of other stuff. So I think Apple Pencil really had a really nice uplift this year and some really great features. And I can't wait to sort of see how, you know, as iPad is sort of becoming much more of a platform people are using instead of sort of, you know, laptops and desktops, I'm really excited to see how the pencil is going to develop and what developers sort of do with that. We also had spatial audio on AirPods. Now, one thing that I really liked about this was not only the feature is awesome. So basically you get surround sound, you know, with your AirPods. And as you sort of, you know, move your head relative to your device, the sound will actually move with that, right? So if you turn around, the sound will actually move with you. And what I liked about this was not only is the feature really cool, but the way that they visualize it in the keynote and the examples they gave of, say, you know, if you're in a bus and the bus, you know, makes a turn, or you're on a plane and the plane's turning, etc. Like the visualizations they gave made it really clear, not only to developers but also to consumers, you know, what this can actually do. So I'm really excited about that. Everything about it was really cool. And I'm sort of interested to sort of try. I think it's going to be one of those things that's a little more sort of seamless and you might not notice it's happening. But once you sort of recognize it, it's going to be like, wow, that's really cool. Also, sleep tracking on Apple Watch. So, you know, or for some, the lack thereof. I know for me, I've been looking at it and it quite eye-opening. But, you know, basically now we can get sleep data from our Apple Watch, right? So, which is interesting because I know for myself personally, I would charge my Apple Watch at night. So, you know, getting a time in the day now to sort of change my charging schedule would be great, but iOS and watchOS will actually give you notifications to let you know, hey, you should charge your watch now, etc. And what's cool about this is that, you know, you can basically wake up in the morning and you can see like how well rested you were, and you can sort of get the trend alignment with the rest of your health goals, etc. So I'm really excited for this, and, you know, hopefully it'll encourage some more better sleep patterns on my end. Another really cool thing that I think was also sort of, like it's one of those things that would just work really seamlessly is also HomeKit facial recognition. So I think, right now in this space, there's a lot of manufacturers who produce, they have a manufacturer built app for their, HomeKit integration, whether that's a camera or a smart lock, et cetera. And this is one of those features that I think is going to also make consumers say, no, I want you to add HomeKit. I want HomeKit support, because now you can basically get facial recognition. So when you get the notification, it's going to say, James is at the door, instead of just, someone is at the door. And I think, these sorts of, subtle sprinkles of machine learning around the iOS are really, really shining and making iOS much smarter. But also it's really exciting to sort of just see, all of this working together. And there's a lot of really cool stuff on this front on HomeKit for Apple TV as well. So I'd recommend you check that out if this is something that you're really interested in. So there's a lot of stuff on iOS, but I'm going to move on now to macOS. So we have Big Sur. Big Sur, big announcements. This is actually macOS 11, which is pretty exciting because we, for a long time we were sort of on macOS X or macOS version 10. So having macOS version 11, I think is just pretty cool, and I think it's really well timed with the sort of Apple Silicon transition and stuff like that. And there's a lot of sort of fundamental changes there. If you want to read more on Apple Silicon, there's a lot of really cool stuff that's happening with sort of Rosetta and sort of the way that you can launch apps that were built for Intel. And I've got a little bit more on sort of the development side of this sort of thing later on. But basically, I think this is just a really, really exciting thing for macOS to happen in general. macOS also got some other cool things. So iMessage updates, or as I like to call it, Confetti for the Mac. So now a lot of the iOS features that were available on iMessage are now available on Mac. So you've got sort of all your effects are now there. You can change images for like group conversations, and you sort of got like your Memoji and all that kind of stuff is now available on Mac. Also on iOS and sort of in the platform in general, iMessage got some pretty cool new features as well. So now you can see here in the slide, there's sort of these like threading that's available in iMessage. So you can actually reply directly to a message. And this is really good, if you sort of work with people across time zones, or you've got group conversations that sort of go across time zones, et cetera. You've basically got, you can just reply to a message and it's really contextual. And I think that's really great. What's also really contextual as well is directed replies. So I could say, hey, at Zach, and I could actually write a message and it will sort of like highlight his name there. And I think it's really good because it sort of, it just makes the conversation more clearer. And it's something that a lot of other platforms like Slack and all that had sort of had these kinds of notions. So bringing it to iMessage, just sort of these personal conversations, is going to be really, really great. One of the other big changes for Big Sur was app icons. Now, this one has had quite a bit of controversy in the community. People either love it or they hate it. I don't really think there's much of an in-between. Personally, I think I quite like it. And I think this is one of those transitions that's going to be sort of like iOS 6 to iOS 7, right? Like, I think it'll be interesting is sort of to see, what everyone thinks about this 12 months on, once we've had, once people have actually used it and they've sort of had these changes. I'm noticing as well that a lot of these icons are consistent with sort of the iPad and the Mac version, the iOS version. So it's sort of nice to sort of, if you're a user who uses all the platforms, you sort of have this more consistency that's sort of more eventual and sort of nice to just have across the board. Cool. Okay, Safari, faster, private, and snazzier. So a lot of stuff happened in Safari. So much stuff. Safari 14 is going to be awesome. Basically, you get a privacy report now, so you can sort of see more information on like websites that are tracking you and all these sorts of things. Tab management, again, huge. Because now you can move around your tabs much easier. You can sort of see the previews for them. Everything is going to be really, really great on that front. But also from the security perspective, we've now got password breach monitoring. So without sending your password to Apple, Safari can actually alert you if your password's being used. So I think this is going to be pretty cool and pretty good for just like securing our apps as developers if our users know that the password that they're using isn't secure, right? So I think this is exciting because it's sort of, we don't have to do anything, but as people, if you make websites, et cetera, you're going to get that built in. I think that's sort of really nice to have. Another really nice thing to have has been translation in Safari. So you can actually now translate whole web pages just in Safari alone. But further on this, I don't have a slide on this, but basically further on translation, what I'm really excited about is there's a new Translate app on iOS. So you can actually have conversations there. And also Siri has translation capabilities in it as well. So, and I believe this may have been introduced earlier, but the translation ability is really great, especially in times where, I think we're all working remotely, companies are moving sort of more distributed, and we are dealing with, people from different languages, etc. And so having translation capabilities there, I think sort of just adds to the globalization of these products and tools. And I think it's really great to sort of have it. I'm excited to be able to just, browse the web and click a button, translate, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be pretty cool to sort of see that, in use as well. Another thing that always blows my mind is ARKit. We have so much cool stuff. I only have one slide in ARKit actually for today, but basically location anchoring. So you can place items globally now as a developer. And what this means is that you can place items in the real world and anchor them to real world objects. There was an open source project by Project Den and Andrew from that project basically open sourced that, and it was really cool. So I'm really excited to sort of see this baked into the OS now and available there. And also developers now have access to the depth data of LiDAR sensors. So that's going to be really cool for people that actually use that for measurements, et cetera, because you can, get the raw LiDAR data now, which is incredible. Moving on, because I am running a little behind time here, but basically SwiftUI, a year on, so many cool improvements. I'm going to jump through them really quickly, but we have the app protocol. So the app protocol is a really declarative way to sort of declare the app. And I think this is going to be sort of just from the paradigm way of thinking about SwiftUI, this is a pretty important change. And I'm pretty excited to sort of see that. Now, I myself am not too much of a SwiftUI developer. I'm still definitely much in UIKit land. I've dabbled in SwiftUI a little bit though. And I can definitely see how, these sorts of things are going to be really good. Text editor. So now you can have multi-line labels that are scrollable and all that in SwiftUI. Really exciting. A lot of really cool new view stuff in SwiftUI. Also, a lot of really cool property wrappers in SwiftUI. So we've got app storage, which basically wraps around user defaults, which is going to be really, really good. And also, there's some really cool stuff as well. So scaled metrics property wrapper. This is going to allow you to actually scale views based on dynamic type. So if we've got dynamic type, you might want to have an image view that you scale relative to, say, the title size or something like that. There's now a property wrapper for that called scaled metric, which you can use to sort of create your UIs in more of a responsive way. And also the state object is as well is new and sort of replaces some of the things that we would have done previously with observed objects because they're reference types that are now going to stay alive, and sort of observed object would release objects sometimes earlier. So sort of having these new property wrappers and improvements to SwiftUI is going to be really, really helpful as we sort of, people are building more SwiftUI apps and as we use it a lot more, especially in widgets and these kinds of things as well. So I mentioned earlier that there was some new views in SwiftUI. So some of the ones I'm really excited about, two of them actually are map views. So now you can do a map view and you don't have to go back into UIKit to sort of bring a map view in. I think this is really exciting because, especially for developers that are, new to iOS development and they might be learning SwiftUI, they don't have to, sort of learn some UIKit to sort of bring into SwiftUI. I mean, there might still be some, but it's like a lot less if the, maps is a pretty common thing a lot of apps have, right? And also another pretty common thing apps have is actually video players, right? So video players and maps are pretty, two pretty prominent things in a lot of apps today. And so having this available in SwiftUI out of the box, I think is just going to be really great and really easy for developers to just use that having to create, UI view representables and sort of wrapping around the UIKit objects, etc. So I think this is going to be really good. Now for probably my favorite section, and I might be a little biased here having worked on some of the teams that have worked on some of these products, but machine learning, I think was, obviously we saw in some of the previous slides how that's been sort of put all around the operating system. And so there's a large emphasis on that. But for developers, there's a lot of now really cool machine learning things that we can do in our apps. So let's explore this in a little bit more detail. So CreateML had a really, really fundamentally huge changes here. So we've got checkpointing now. So what this means is that you can actually train a model and you can create checkpoints as you go along, right? So you might have a model that you might have a lot of data and it might be taking, a lot of hours or days. And, if you're training on a MacBook, now you can basically pause your training and then you can resume it later on. So, you might not be able to train all at once. And so you can actually do that now. And you can also pause and sort of, you get progress in some of the models as they're training. So you can actually see, as a video style transfer model is sort of going across, you might be able to see the results of that model at the different checkpoints, and you can sort of see it improving over time. So you may want to pull one of those out and test with it or something like that. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do now with checkpointing. Another really cool thing is we've got action classification. So this is insane. So you basically can have poses, and people can do poses. So you might have like a frisbee throwing app or a baseball app or soccer or any sport, or even not just sports, but different sorts of exercises, etc. And you may want to classify a user action based on what they're doing. So having this is going to be really cool because you basically drag in some videos, you click train, it's all 0 lines of code, and it works with the Vision framework, and it ties in really nicely as a developer experience. It's actually not that many lines of code to then go and implement into your app. Last but not least, we have video style transfer and image style transfer. So basically, you might have some media, be that a video or images, and you might say, well, I have perhaps a Van Gogh painting or something like that, and I want to actually apply that style to my media. And so basically, you can create a machine learning model that'll now apply those translations to your media. And this is really exciting because we sort of see some of this in like the Clips app and some other apps across iOS that do this. But being able to just create an app that does that by dragging a few files into CreateML and clicking a button, I think is really exciting. CoreML also had some really, really cool updates as well. So one of the major things was CoreML model deployment. So now, if you ship a CoreML model with your app, you may know that you can compile a model on the device. So you could host it on your own server, compile it and run it. But what's really cool now is that you can actually do this through iCloud. And so basically you can upload models to iCloud and then actually download them to the device and sort of provide continuous personalization to your users. So I think this is going to be really exciting. And this is not just the models that are in CreateML, but you can actually do this for CoreML models that you've got in your app that you might have trained through conversions or through other ways as well. So this is going to be exciting. And I think it's going to allow a lot more developers to actually add some more machine learning here and there into their apps. And last but not least, in CoreML, we have model encryption. So you can now actually encrypt models at rest, even in their compiled forms. And I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in any of this stuff, to go and watch the sessions. They're really detailed. And it's actually really easy. You can do a lot of this in Xcode through UIs now, and it's really, really fun. And it's really, really great, especially if you're into you want to build machine learning models into your app. So a little more machine learning. So Vision now has hand pose and body pose detection. And if you look on the diagram on the right here, you can see it's actually pretty detailed, right? So you can get a lot of, you can classify a lot of actions based on this. So I'm really excited about, sort of seeing how developers combine this, maybe ARKit and CoreML, and sort of seeing, what people create. Vision also has a whole lot of new stuff as well. So I'd recommend you check out their documentation. And actually great news on combining all this together. Apple's actually kind of done this in sample code. So this is actually my favorite sample code project this year, which I think is a pretty big thing to say, but it really is the Action and Vision app. So basically what they've done is they've used a bunch of CoreML, CreateML, and Vision to build a really cool app that is a beanbag tossing app. So as you toss a beanbag, they actually calculate the trajectory of that beanbag and give you a score based on that. So this sort of uses some object detection. You've got some activity classification and the new trajectory APIs that are available in Vision that can track basically the trajectories of objects that you're tracking. So I think this is really, really cool. I think this is one of those things where we saw HomeKit, the basketball app, sort of did that a few years back with basketball specifically, and I think this is going to enable a lot more developers to actually create some really fun experiences that once we're all outside again, I'm definitely going to be playing around with the beanbag tossing app and sort of all these different sorts of things because it's really exciting. And then as developers, we got some really cool new stuff in our dev tools. So obviously Xcode 12, incredible. We now have the ability to make universal apps. So this is basically creating for Apple Silicon as well as sort of Intel. And obviously Xcode 12 now supports that. So that's really good. StoreKit got a lot more stuff on the testing front. So we can now test StoreKit transactions much easier. And there's a lot more UI for that. Xcode as a whole also got a bunch of new UI stuff. So, some buttons may have moved around, but you can sort of get familiar with that. And that's going to, I think, make a lot of our workflows really easy. I really like the new style, quite a fan of it. And there's also a lot of new UI components as well. So you can do all your model encryption for CoreML in Xcode now. So you can just sort of do that in a GUI. It's really, really nice. There's a lot of UI that's been improved on the sort of dev tools side of things. So I'd recommend sort of, you play around with that. and also, create ML, like graphs. There's so much stuff that the DevTools teams have done to actually improve UI and just make a lot of the things that we would have had to have done previously more tediously. They've made them really easy and really simple for developers. So that's exciting. Cool. So now I want to talk about some fun gems that I found. So these are sort of things that I may have missed in the keynote, or things that I found out as I was sort of making this slide deck that I just thought were like, wow, these are really, really cool. So for instance, one of the first things is AirPods motion data. So, we saw spatial audio, but what's really cool is that they went a step further and they're actually allowing developers to get the motion data of AirPods, right? So you can sort of see gyro and accelerometer and all that kind of stuff. This is really cool because it's one of those things that I think, they're going to release out there, and like there'll be some really cool app that a developer will make or something that's just going to be like, wow, that is awesome. And I think for me, this is just like, I'm really, really impressed with this. So that was sort of AirPods motion data. Additionally, we got upgrade to sign in with Apple. So I know when they announced sign in with Apple, I had a lot of accounts on a lot of apps that, eventually added sign in with Apple. But what's really great now is that, the apps can actually allow me to upgrade to sign in with Apple. So if I upgrade to sign in with Apple, I can basically, I don't have to remember the email or phone number or whatever I use at sign up, because now I can just transition my account to a sign in with Apple account. So it's really great that developers can now upgrade their accounts. And I think this is, again, one of those things that, a lot of users will really appreciate once developers really incorporate it in. And back to the whole, one of the things I'm excited that developers are, going to be able to play around with now is actually the nearby interaction framework. So this gives you relative positioning of U1 devices. So the new U1 chip, you might have seen sort of in AirDrop, you can see other, chip devices with U1 in it. Developers will now basically see the distances and relative location of that. So that's really exciting. And some of the examples that Apple sort of provided on the website was like, you could do sort of virtual water balloons in AR. You can make AR experiences with that, or you might be able to do, ride sharing, right? Like if you're trying to find your driver, you can sort of walk around and you'll be able to see where your driver's going, where they're at. And I think this is going to be really good, subtle features developers will add to their apps. And not only on the subtle front, but also, new apps that are spawned out of this, I think are going to be really, really, really good and just really exciting to see. And there's so much more. I could talk for hours and hours and hours on just, what was released. I don't know sites for everything, but, really quickly, we got a whole bunch of stuff in picture-in-picture, all the way from FaceTime to sort of videos. FaceTime got sign language detection. We got all the, binary support in Swift Package Manager. So if you're doing that, Swift Package Manager got a, huge overhaul as well. On the DevTool side of things, AV Foundation stereo data. So you can actually see, where the audio source is coming from the left or the right. And I think this is going to be really cool when you combine with AR experiences and those kinds of things. WatchOS has got hand washing recognition. So like not only from the developer front, but also from the user front, there's just so much that's been done. I'm really excited to see what developers make. And this pretty much concludes my talk for the WWDC in review. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions on anything I've talked about, please feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to give guidance there. And yeah, I'm super excited to see what you all build. Thanks.
Thanks heaps for that, James. That was awesome. Great WWDC summary. So if anyone didn't watch WWDC, I don't think you need to anymore. That was awesome. It'd be great to have you back in person talking at an event when we're allowed to do that. But thanks again for tonight. That's great.
James, Zach.
Yes.
What are the most exciting parts for you guys?
Yeah, I am definitely really excited about all the ML stuff. I am a little biased there. I get that, but it is. No, I genuinely do think though that it's something that, I think every year there's sort of the phase between WWDC and when, the actual OS drops, that developers are sort of working on all this stuff. And there's a lot of frameworks that I think were released in machine learning space where it was like, we built this, here you go. And then there wasn't really like okay, this is how you have to use it. It's a very creative thing. And I think a lot of developers are going to like take that, combine all this stuff together, and then depending on what combinations they put together, there's going to be some really cool output from that. So I'm most excited about ML. Otherwise, Apple Silicon, huge. For me, I think that's going to be really, really good. And having Neural Engine on the Mac.
Nice. Do you think the machine learning is going to be integrated into the Apple Silicon as well?
Yeah, so it was mentioned on the slide. So it was mentioned on the slide that the neural engine will be in there. And so neural engine performs really, really quickly as opposed to sort of what we have available on Mac today. So I think there'll be more machine learning experiences that developers can do on Mac just because there's a neural engine in there that they currently may not be able to do. Yeah.
Yep. Zach and Jack.
Yeah. I don't know. There's no one thing that I can point to this year and be like, that's what I'm excited for. As a consumer, if I had to, it would probably be widgets and also iMessage effects on the Mac. But as a dev, I really it's an interesting year. It's very incremental, but I think a lot of the SwiftUI stuff is great. If you can, if you hadn't made the jump to SwiftUI and you are in a position where you can support 14 and up, then you can do most things with SwiftUI. I think that's huge. I think we spoke last month about a lack of proper navigation abilities in SwiftUI. And while that's similar, I think we're getting more to a point where you can use SwiftUI for more things, being able to handle deep links, for example, in the new, is it the app protocol? Something like that. So yeah, I think we're getting there. The improvements to Xcode are really nice. So I've been in Xcode 12 for the better part of a month now, and it's just nice. So just sort of that day-to-day improvement. Yeah. How about you, Jack?
Yeah, obviously I'm a big fan of the new security improvements, which is signing with Apple and all that related stuff that I want to talk a little bit later. And SwiftUI is a big improvement as well. I'm a big fan of that. I love it as well. Hoping for the new bright future for SwiftUI and all developers. We should live in declarative world, not imperative. And yeah, a lot of stuff. Yeah, new silicon is very huge stuff as well. It's very hard to understand now how big is that, because it's a future, but it's very cool to already touching that, be able to work with that. And obviously integration of operation system in one thing, getting all the macOS, iOS, tvOS, whatever, all that stuff being one ecosystem is a big step as well.
For me, it's that all of the users that support iOS 13 also support iOS 14. So if you're able to drop iOS 12, you can drop iOS 13 as well, because it supports all of those users. You can jump straight to all of the newest SwiftUI stuff. So
yeah,
that's as a developer. And then as a user, Apple Silicon, the developer kit, that excites me. Yeah. It is amazing to see what that thing can do.
Everyone's speaking very highly of it. So it'll be interesting to see what production units look like. What do we think are going to be the first machines that ship with Apple Silicon, apart from maybe the Mac Mini? Let's take that out of the equation.
I would not be surprised if Mac Mini going to be released as the last one.
Why is that?
No, I mean the first computer that are going to be released with the new silicon going to be laptop.
Yep.
And it is not surprisingly that Mac Mini going to be the last one.
Because it's a desktop, do you think?
No, because Mac Minis always wait.
Right. Okay.
Historically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Neil's just put a good comment in Slack that it's nice that out of the box, these Apple Silicon Macs are going to get access to potentially millions of iOS apps, assuming too many people don't untick the checkbox that says they allow that. And Matt said he wants a 16-inch MacBook Pro with Apple Silicon. I think we all do. That thing would be a beast.
Silicone, I think.
Silicone.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Yeah. All right. I think if that's all we've got for WWDC things, I'm going to hand over to Jack for a talk on sign in with Apple. Take it away, Jack.
Give me a second.
No problem.
Will share my screen and open my fantastic presentation. Here it is.
Looks good.
So, yeah, I was very bad with getting a name about this talk because it's not about signing with Apple. It's more about providing the better user login experience for your user and what you should know as a developer, what your options. So it's obviously that now we have like a lot of different application services, and they just getting more and more of them. Like at least I have 300 applications on my phone, and I have a lot of web services that I'm using, and each one require me to come up with login and password. And as a result, it's not only me. It's like as a result, it's come up to this creating a simple password, sticking it on a on a display. It shares the password, the same password across all the accounts in all the services. Why it's better? It's like because not all application developer are very good at keeping their user credential in secure place, or like providing their good security politics. So basically, if one of that startups or whatever will reveal your password or your other good account that keeping your password in secret will be compromised as well. And strong password, obviously, they're very hard to remember and extremely hard to type in. That's why we can up with like third-party OAuth providers and services. It's a ton of them that's like trying to provide the single sign-on service, so you just have one password and you authenticate through other services through them. So the most popular through developers is Auth0, and in corporate world, Okta, I believe, is the leader. So, but it's 100 of them. And there is a lot of tech behind that, like standards that help us to do that, providing the single sign-on. It's the most ancient one, OAuth2, OpenID Connect, which is like evolution. The three is like just evolution of one standard. SAML and other like very corporate SSOs, and like it's a ton of them. The most popular one is OpenID Connect, and I was talking about that last talk, I believe, 1 year ago, something like that. And at some point of time, everything goes so wrong that so the main identity provider for the application became Facebook. It is the worst what could happen for humanity, I believe. Why so? Facebook involved in 12 massive account cases of like user data leaks. The most surprising for me was that some of them have unencrypted password. So if you're not familiar like with password security principles, the idea that you should not have stores the password, plain password in your backend. You should hash it and stores the hash to compare with the password user typing. Why so? Because you couldn't get the original password from the hash. So if your data compromised, the password is not leaked out. But Facebook stores their plain password in the system. And this is like huge mistake, I believe, from the site. Maybe they did it on purpose. I believe they did it on purpose. So they have a large and bulky SDK. Everyone who was trying to integrate with Facebook SDK probably know about that. There are a lot of cases when Facebook was caught on spying on data from your users in your apps and web services as well. Moreover, Facebook has a special spy tool called Facebook Pixel. It's used for marketer and like sales teams, but it's not saying that it's not a spying tool. It's just technically the spying tool that spy for the user data. And 3 critical cases was involved in 2020 alone. It's touched a lot of like, I believe the whole globe, because the majority of the application was not working because of that back in Facebook SDK. And it should happen for this big company, I believe. Like if someone saw that Facebook is still an option, I believe now any company that was affected by that false, they already considered moving out from Facebook as an identity service. So what we are looking for as the best solution, because all single sign-on solution on the market is basically web-based, and there is no single full native application. So all the SAML, OpenID Connect, of 1 and 2, they are web-based. They declare your web-based flow to authenticate your users. As Apple said, best password is no password. So we should not have password for the user. Otherwise, we'll come up to the same problem with a simple password and sharing password across all the services. And ideally, it's going to be like one-tap experience. And it is the feature that made Amazon the famous, like one-click buy option. By the way, it's not, they had a patent on that, but the patent is expired, so you can use this feature on your apps now if you want. It's the same, yeah, sorry. So solution number 0. Basically, it is not a solution, but it's just an option. So if you still have to authenticate your user through the web UI, you should consider using their AS web authentication session. So this is a flexible tool for you from Apple to secure and easy way to authenticate through using the web service in your native app. It is a couple of features that help you to improve the user flow and user experience with that. So you can style that web view. You can share the cookies from Safari session. So obviously, if the user already authenticated in Safari, you can use it in your web view. This web view is not accessible through the application, so you couldn't steal, or anyone couldn't steal their sensitive data from that as well. And you optionally could request ephemeral browsing. What does it mean is just it opens their clean and clean browsing session with no cookies and anything else, just to be more secure sometimes. And it handles callback redirection automatically. So web authentication, well, when you got on a web page, you authenticate it, and it's redirect you back on the web page as well. So this web authentication session basically handles that situation and calls a callback in your native code. If you want to go deep in there, it's WWDC session about that. But as I said, it's not an option. It's just a way to improve your web authentication if you still have to do that. This is how it looks. If you implement that application explicitly requires the user, if he's happy to go and sign in through the web view using the data that already on device. So, and now let's talk about solutions. So solution number 1, it is iCloud Keychain Password Manager. So if you're gonna go and for the deep knowledge about that, it's WWDC session in 2017. As you can see, it's like 3 years old already. It's not something new, but unfortunately, the majority of applications haven't used it in the apps. And it is still a good way to authenticate and keep the user credential because, first of all, their authentication going to be shared across all the user devices. If he have done it in Safari or other iPad, you have this credential on your iPhone. This flow automatically suggests a user a good password. It's when he sign up or log in or trying to reset the password. This flow, like compared to if you're using third-party key password managers like 1Password or LastPass, this approach is more secure because Apple ensures a strong association between your website and your application. I'll show it a little bit later how it works. Web-based app is not perfect, but still acceptable. You can use web-based authentication with a keychain approach as well. What is new and what is cool is that if you're using iCloud Keychain Manager, it will automatically provide you the seamless upgrade to sign in with Apple And if you like consider migrating to sign in with Apple, that will make very easy way for your user to do that, making your and their life easier. Even if you require two-factor authentication, it is already implemented from Apple side. It's going to be available on iOS 14 only, but just making consider if you're going to migrate and you utilize two-factor authentication with phone number or authentication application, it's still possible to integrate with this flow. It is like extremely easy to implement this iCloud Keychain Manager. What you can do is just create associated domain and assign the content type to your username and password fields. And the other thing is that your backend or your authenticator manager or on the cloud should implement Apple app type association to establish this two-way secure website to application association. So let me, yeah, this is how it looks on a real application smart runs that we are creating. So whenever I want to sign up to the service, as you can see, when I go to the password field, it's auto-filled with their strong password, and Apple suggests me to use this password or choose my own. The bad thing about that's why I want to show the screenshot is, as you can see, it's very hard to style it. So if you want to look it good, just try to do your setup screen white with the white background, because as you can see, it's not good looking on it with a bad background, even if it's trying to adapt it. So give me 1 second. So talking about their association between your application and identity service, what you need to do is go to this sign-in and capabilities section, and here you should add new capabilities, and it's have domain. It's already yeah, domain. It's going to be an option as associated domains. I already added it, so I couldn't search it in pop-up. So as you can see, it is have like web credential identifier jackrodenko.com. This is my authentication service in the cloud. That is, so basically you're telling applications that you trust to deal with this web server, and from the web server side, all you should do is, this is my identifier. It is unfortunately not showing me the actual content of that, but if I go here and do something what it should have their app with my Apple ID in there. So getting back to that, how it works is basically when application runs and I'm making a request to opening the window with login and email and login, and I have the fields set it up that is email and password, and Safari already authenticated on my Mac, for example, and all my credentials saved in iCloud Keychain. Safari knows the domain name, so the credential was saved from this domain name, and this domain name is associated with my Apple application ID, which is give me a second, which is called identifier demo. And this is creating this trust connection, so I can use password for these both places, for this application and for this web service. So getting back to that thing, why it's good, it's just basically because now I don't need to remember my password. All my iOS devices still remember this password and allow me to sign in with no typing involved in there at all, just one click. And the second thing is that I still can see this password in my password manager in the settings. When I want to log in and open the login screen, you can see this quick bar above the keyboard that show me the possible sign in option automatically. So what I need is just click this quick bar and all the fields going to be filled up with the actual credentials. It's cool with just 2 clicks, not 1 click. 1 click to fill, 1 click to log in. I've already done a demo. So the second solution is the best one, or better one, sign in with Apple. Why it's better? It looks like it's just one simple button, but it's not as obvious. So technically one button requires you a lot of kind of work to be done on the iPhone side, and a lot of work should be done on your backend. And because backend developers, they don't watch on WDC sessions, so this is one of the problems. So they don't know about these capabilities. So it's your responsibility to go to your team and talk to them that they should implement them and provide them the good reason to do that. Now, getting back to code. If I run my application, it's dummy application that available on GitHub with Identify iOS SDK. So you can jump in and see through the source code. So it had sign in with username. Unfortunately, this iCloud keychain password manager is not available on a simulator. So you could not see all these fantastic features here, but just trust me, if you open it on your device, it should work fine. Why I'm sure that? Because to help you with all those integrations that happening under the hood, Apple did a fantastic stuff. So you have all this stuff if something goes wrong in your application console while you're debugging. So here in autofill, you can see that iCloud keychain is disabled, and there is no way to enable it on simulator, at least for now. So it makes you visual status what's happening under the hood. Otherwise, it's gonna be very hard to debug this thing. So what I want to show you is continue with Apple. Technically, there is 3 options: sign in with Apple, sign up with Apple, and continue with Apple. From backend point of view, there is no any reasons to make these dedications to split them on 3 different sections, because when you provide to the backend your credential, you can basically make a choice. If the user exists, you just sign in. If the user doesn't exist, you just create a user and sign in him. And continue with Apple is basically combine them both. But if there is any specific reason why you should split these flows in your application, you have this feature. But what I suggest is just use continue with Apple. That will automatically sign up the user if he haven't exist. So what's happening if I push this button? Application will show me the information what's happening here. So it is fast and easy. Apple help us to convince user to use sign in with Apple. It is showing that it respects our privacy. Technically, Apple is the only company that provide you platform build to keep your users' credentials in secret place. It's very interesting, but this is what we have today. And hide your email. Probably you already know about this fantastic feature that you can hide your real email and escape yourself from marketing materials and other stuff. When I hit continue, I have an option here. I can share my original email, or I can hide my email. Just keep in mind just one thing, that I am sharing my name, but I could change it and do with a fake name. Let me change for some name. So now for this application, I have the fake name, and this is done for security reasons as well. So Apple trying to keep your data as secure as possible and not sharing anything with your permission, without your permission. Here, my application requests to obtain my name and email, but it's not required. So if you don't need these fields, just don't request them. Otherwise, it just introduces one level of barrier between you and your user. So if I hit continue with password and basically ask for my password, but on device I'm gonna be required to use biometric authentication with my Face ID or Touch ID, which is fantastic because when you sign in with Apple to your application, you ensure that the user is biometrically authenticated with most strong tools on the planet for now. Let's dive into code. If you go on and download this application from the GitHub, I'll help you to find out what's happening there. All the logic happening in intro view controller. And this is the code that we need. That's what you need to sign in with Apple. You are creating their authorization Apple ID provider. The other option is authorization with email and password, which help you to utilize their iCloud password manager. You can use them both. And this is cool because if the user has a credential in a cloud keychain, they could sign in with that. And what's more exciting that just with one click, they could migrate or upgrade, how Apple call it, not migrate, upgrade to sign in with Apple. So I highly recommend if you are using both, just use both authorization providers. We are creating requests and identifying the request code. It could be empty. You don't need to request user email name just because they are not unique identifier for your user. I'll talk about that a little bit later. There is two more options that I highly recommend to not avoid is nonce and state. Nonce basically is their extra security layer to obtain the relay attack on your authentication tool. So if there is man in the middle who will interact with you, you ensure with this nonce that you get the key from Apple, not from someone else. And the state is basically utilizing your backend authentication state because it could be multi-step. So to ensure which step is that, you can use the state here. It is random string, so there is no special requirements around that. You could not use them at all. But as I said, it's recommended to use nonce and check it on your side. Then you just create the authorization controller with your request, setting up the delegate, presentation context provider. I will talk about these two guys a little bit later, and perform request. After the perform request, you are just showing this UI to your user, and it's fantastic. So what you should do in your delegate is a lot of warning because we're not doing anything with the data, but this is your delegate implementation. There is two methods to implement. The first one is authorization controller, did complete with authorization. So when authorization done successfully, you're gonna obtain this data, authorization data, which is authorization Apple ID credential. If you're using authorization through the password manager, you're gonna get the different instance here. That's why we doing this casting. What data are available after you get the Apple sign in? It's the user. Technically, it's their user ID, long string with no meaning at all. What you should know about that this user ID should be your way to identify the user across your app. This user ID should be the same across all your application in your team. So if there is other team, you probably could match the user from other company. Or if your company using the different teams to release the different applications, it's going to be bad news for you. You could match the user with sign in with Apple. So consider to merge everything in your one account. Full name, only if we request for that. And just remember that user could type anything. Don't rely on this information a lot. Email, it's optional as well. If the user allow you to use the native email, that's okay, but they could use their private email. This private email is working through their secure Apple relay system. What is important that this email gonna be unique for the same user across your team as well, the same as a credential user. But I highly consider not using that because user could share with you with his real email. And in some scenarios, you don't need to ask them for email just to identify them. If you use user ID as the main key to identify your user, you don't need this email. Just informal to send them some kind of marketing materials or do remarketing to them or sending some useful information, updates, whatever. Don't use it as a key identification criteria. Fantastic feature that Apple introduced us is real user status. So technically, it is enum that have three different options. So unsupported, unknown, and likely real. So if the user is likely real, so you can realize that it's the real user. If the user unknown, you could consider that it could be a bot or automated system. Why do you need it? Because you can provide a different user experience for that kind of user. So if you are not sure if it's a real user and you have very sensitive information or very valuable information, you can ask them to provide extra identification system, something like upload their docs or whatever. But if they likely real, you can realize them they already checked by the Apple. But nobody guarantees. So if you're like creating government applications that 100% require regulated like ID or something else from the user, don't rely on this thing as well. It's just informative, not declarative. There is other technical stuff in there as well. So state, it is a state that you have sent to the Apple with a request. ID token is JWT token that user returned to you. Authorization code is a special code for your backend to check their authentication status and communicate with the Apple server for your user. So the good thing about signing with Apple is that your backend could communicate and obtain the user status even if your application is not running or not starting. And scopes, it is a scope that you have requested. Technically, it's possible that the scopes could be changed. So user could unclick, I don't want to share this. So you requested, for example, email scope, and here you can check if email has been returned. But with the current implementation with signing with Apple, if you requested something and user don't want to provide this information to you, authentication is not happening. So everything you requested is required. So it's probably maybe for the future or to be more flexible with your code to check the scopes. The other method is authentication controller did complete with error. So you have highly considered to process errors. So my development flow is process the errors first. So basically the best experience when you provide a good and reliable, informative way for the user how to recover from the state when something bad happens. And I highly recommend to start your implementation from this piece of code, even if in this example we don't have anything in there. So this is everything about control and delegate. And as you mentioned, there's other guy who is presentation context provider. So this is basically the guy who should say what window is a key window for to be presented on. In the majority of the cases, you just return your main window. But if you're using multi-window environments, it's going to be up to you which of the windows you're going to use for the user. For iPhone, it's going to be your only one choice, obviously. So that is regarding demonstration. Let's go back and see what we have. One more time, like user ID is consistent across your team. So technically you should use this user ID. This user ID is, sorry, I just want to try to show you what is JWT token and what you should do with that. So let me, okay, one more time. Yes. Yes. So, what? Yeah. So ID token is just JSON representation of the data with all the fields, your application ID, your let me talk. It's in data. It's not in a string. Okay, so what you can do to investigate it, you can get this ID token, transfer its string, and go to the JWT.io. And pass the token here. After that, you will get all the information stored in token. So just a little help how to debug this token. Technically, token is everything that need for you or for your backend, and I will show you why. So user ID is consistent across your team, and this token has the user ID in there. So you don't need to get it from the credential, so it's going to be like just helpful. Like private mail is consistent across your team as well. So even if the user want to hide email from you, you can still send him marketing materials and communicate with him through email. Name and email available only the first time. So when the user authenticates the first time, the Apple return it to you. So always cache it somewhere, not somewhere in keychain, obviously, because if you are trying to send it to your server and something failed, you're not going to get this information again from the Apple. The good news that you will lose only their username, because email, if you requested email, this email going to be included in their user ID token. So you don't worry about that a lot. And you can extract this email from JWT token as well. Button. Yes, button. It is sad, but Apple don't have ready button for you to just drop in and use it in your application. It is a button class that can do that, but it's not a problem because there is a special section that you could customize your button as you wish. Basically, there's 3 styles available. You can get their web version or download the PNG. So it's not a big deal. It's just a regular button, and it can be consistent through the Apple UI guidelines just using this tool provided by Apple. The good news is that Apple introduced a sign-in button for the SwiftUI this year. So it's going to be available for iOS 14. And you can still implement this button through the coding, not through their interface builder. So let's go next. Yes, let me show you the identifier. What is that? Why I'm talking about this thing? Because you're a mobile developer, and as we know, sometimes it's very difficult to convince other team to use like secure method or whatever. Or if you're doing your own startup, it's gonna introduce a big chunk of work in the stack that you're not familiar with. So that's why the majority of developers just keeping that, because they just don't want to have a deal with that. And I have a solution for you. It's called Identify. As you already saw, it's a very simple tool with a fantastic UI. It has the Apple integration. It has a tons of customization, and you can create the application with secure credential. Oh no, you see how secure is that? It even don't allow me to sign in for a long time. So like having the multiply applications or user management building and hosted pages for signing, like invitation email, welcome reset, and two-factor authentication involved. So everything, it's like 5 minutes up and running. We are going to release the documentation first, so going you through how to set up and use it. SDK are available in GitHub already, so just easy to start and use. So give me a second. So 90% of the job required for signing with Apple are already done with Identify. So the code that I have just shown you in the application, it is enough for you to start in today. As you can see, just 10 minutes of work, and your user going to be happy to use the sign-in with Apple, which is fantastic. There is 3 ways to deploy your Identify service. So this is the most complicated one. If you have a very large system with a lot of modules, so you're probably using Kubernetes. So Identify is Dockerized. It could run natively, communicate with cloud-native solution for persistent data, like etcd for settings or persistent storage in the cloud, and be populated through ingress service to the outer world. So this is like very complex way to integrate that. But if you already have this infrastructure, your DevOps probably going to be happy to hear that Identify can do that. The second way is scalable way. It's very easy. So you have reverse proxy, which is, I love traffic, but everyone knows about engines. Identify as AWS Lambda. Actually, it's the Identify that I'm showing you right now in my browser. It's working as AWS Lambda function. I don't need even a server to run the stuff. And the storage is happening in MongoDB Atlas, which is free till 500 megabytes, I believe. And it's more than enough to keep all your user data in there. And all your storage could be like shared across like S3 storage settings or other options. So S3 is the easy one because you can log in and just change the YAML file, whatever you want. Or it's going to be populated through the environment variables in AWS Lambda function environment settings. So this setup is highly recommended because it's cost you nothing in the beginning, like completely zero, like $2 per month, obviously. And it's enormously scalable. So when you're getting 1 million requests per day to authenticate your user, these things will grow with that. Like it's unbelievable, scalable, and easy. And this is most easiest way, just stop and running in 5 minutes. If you're using Docker Compose and Identify with embedded BoltDB instance and reverse proxy. Obviously, it's not going to be scalable more than one instance. So if you introduce one more instance in the load balancer, it will not work because you couldn't share BoltDB storage across 2 different servers. But it's very cool stuff. If you're doing startup, it's very reliable and it's very cool. And it's still kind of fault tolerance because when you can have like fantastic authentication service for just $5 per month with Extra was introduced in 2019 only, and already a lot of applications using it. Just keep in mind that signing with Apple works across all the platforms, not only the Apple platform, but it works in a cloud and Android as well through the through the JavaScript framework. It's not going to provide the same like fantastic user experience for your user, but it's still the way to authenticate your user on Android using Apple ID, which is fantastic, right? I think it's amazing. Identify implemented under the hood, so you don't need to do anything for that. So let's go about security recommendations, because we talking about sign-in and keeping all the secret. And frankly speaking, what Apple have introduced with sign-in with Apple is a native way to do OpenID Connect, which is kind of like de facto standard now in the market for web authentication. Google still like using this web authentication flow with OpenID Connect on the Google ecosystem with the Android devices. They don't care about user experience at all. They don't care showing you web UI. but Apple cares. That's why they created sign in with Apple with native flow. So technically it's just a copy of this OpenID Connect. It's very similar, but utilizing the native UI and native secure features, which is getting this like security next level. So just don't break this extra security layer and all the efforts Apple did. Just following very simple. Just following the simple security rules. But this security recommendation is considered for the better user experience, which is not possible through the web experience. So Apple automatically indicates the user if they reuse the password across all the system. And what it can do, it can ask user to sign in with Apple, to like upgrade to sign in with Apple and change to the strong password. Change to the strong password is other way that Apple introduced, and it is using their connectivity with the web part to redirect it to their web change form. So whenever you push this button, it will communicate with the identity system with this domain association connection and open your change password window. So the only applications that are using it right now is Twitter, but Identify is implemented, it's under the hood, so it should work for you if you use Identify as well. The other thing is if the password is easy, the security recommendation from Apple will indicate it for the user. And compromised passwords, this is the most favorite feature. There are a lot of services online that monitoring their leaked databases about the password. And I'm kind of in that area. I could say you that every day there is huge, 2 or 3 huge data compromising cases happening in the world. And it's very, very scary because if, as I said, if you are using the same password across all your services, you're very likely to already being compromised. And if you want to check it by yourself, Firefox has this service, so you can go on the Firefox security service and check it online, all your password, all your emails. And here, Apple doing the same thing for you natively on iPhone. So basically, if your password being compromised, you're going to be notified with a push notification moved here, and the first option going to be asked for you to use sign in with Apple. So that's why it's very, very good reason to consider using sign in with Apple in your app if you're not using it yet. So that's why Apple introduced this year the upgrade to sign in with Apple. It is very secure and effortless way for the user to move the credential to sign in with Apple Flow. It is absolutely not require anything from the user, just convinced that, yeah, I want to migrate. That is everything happening under the hood, because you have to implement the account authentication notification extension, and it already communicated with the Apple system to get their current keychain password if it had, and convert it to sign in with Apple, communicated with their backend service. We are going to implement this feature in Identify soon. So it's going to be up and running when it's going to be live. So if you need early access for that, just write me a message. I will provide you the estimation date when it's going to be released in a beta. But just consider that it's going to be done in Identify. So how it works, you just, on the screen, you just push sign in with Apple and everything happening under the hood. So it's basically multi-step, 10-step process, which involves like obtaining the password, getting from the backend, getting authorization if the user could change the authentication credential, getting back to the Apple, then Apple like trying to change it. You're getting provide user sign in with Apple credential. You send it to your backend send it back to the Apple, and Apple delete your credential from the key store. So you're gonna be like completely secure from that step. It is a lot of resources regarding the subject because Apple is working hard last 2-3 years to provide a new native secure way for your user. And that's why it's a lot of topics in there. I highly recommend to go through them for more details because it's very hard for me to put everything in this speech. I was really wanted to show in practical how to easy do that, implement in your app, start and run the identifier server. But as you can see, it's a lot of things to talk about before doing something. So I hope to show you the practical examples next time. But if you want to see something right now, this is all the topics you're going to jump and see. As you can see, everything started in 2017. The oldest topic is introduced in Afterfield 3 years ago. And now we have this fantastic smooth experience with security update suggestion and a smooth translation used from the sign in with email to sign in with Apple, which is fantastic. Yeah, this is the other thing. Shows the flow how it looks when you implement this authentication extension. So technically, it's at 3 different places when Apple convinces you to improve your password or credentials. The first one is in your application settings, is the first screen. The second one is security recommendations that I was talking before. And the third time, every time you sign into an application with insecure credentials, you're going to be notified to sign in with Apple or change your password to the strong password. Both these flows is completely automated and doesn't require from user any efforts, just improvement. Just this is like amazing, easy way, which is fantastic. Yeah, as I said, if you require one more thing to consider, if you require two-factor authentication and show some additional steps for your user to migrate, you can do that with a extended flow, which is involve UI in your extension, which is possible as well. The other thing, very cool thing in 2020 that you should consider as well, it's not related to iPhone development directly, but the thing that Apple now, when you have sign in with Apple, Apple communicate with your backend directly through the WebSocket. And it's always notify you when the user disabled email. What does it mean? It don't want to get email notification from you anymore. Enable email, that's a good thing. If you ask the user for email in settings, he can get and like disable email or enable email for you. That's fantastic thing, I think. Consent works. It's like when the user don't want to be sign in to your application anymore, and account deleted. If you don't listen to these messages, you could come up with situation where the application is loading, everything works fine, but technically the user not signed in with Apple anymore. So you can ignore these messages. It's not critical, but it's a good way, it's a good approach to treat your users is listen for their decision. And this is real-time, fantastic way to get the decision regarding the sign-in flow with your application. And if you obey the decision, it's going to introduce fantastic experience for them. So this communication doesn't involve application at all. So it's direct communication with Apple Cloud and your backend. We are going to introduce it to identify as well. So not because it's involved some like bunch of work on the backend side, and we're gonna like eliminate it, not eliminate, but remove that from your flow. So the other thing that I want to talk is that the passwords that Apple generate for you, even they very secure, the very good thing Apple did is they made them easy to type. If you compare this, like on the top, you can see one of the example of that password, and compared to the serial number of the Windows, it's huge difference, because if anyone was trying to type serial number from the sticker on the computer, it's so painful. So Apple introduced that strong password with like human writable words, and you can modify that. So there is a password rule validation tool, and you can create that rules and put it in info list of your application. After that, Apple will generate their password using these rules. But the default rules are very good. The only reason to use this password rule validation tool is if your backend couldn't handle that password. So you need to customize that. Otherwise, I just recommend use it as is. That is. Just follow me on Twitter and go on a GitHub, put a star and notification on Identify. We're going to release a very big update soon, and it will include all the new feature from WWDC 2020. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. That was very interesting. Jack is available in the Slack group if you've got any questions and you want to ask him anything after that talk. Cool. So that wraps up for tonight. That was our one talk. That was really good. Thanks again, Jack. We're going to have a post meetup Zoom catch up, and I'm going to post a link for that in the Slack group immediately following the end of this call. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Thanks, James. Thanks, Jack. Really appreciate the talks tonight. And we hope to see you all back again next month. Have a good month. Stay safe, everyone.
That's good. Cheers.
Cheers.